we're starting with Raw, as Seth Rollins was seen limping after his match with Jinder Mahal, and an MRI is set to take place later this week on his leg. An injury could not come at a worse time for Rollins, who is expected to face CM Punk at WrestleMania 40, but now WWE may need to look towards a backup. According to the latest reports, if Rollins vs. Punk does not go ahead this April, WWE may have Punk face an old adversary, that being John Cena. Right now, there are no reports as to what WWE has planned for Cena at WrestleMania, if anything at all, and a Punk match would be a big deal. The two stars are very familiar with one another, given their history, and WWE would be counting on John to save the day and face Punk. Cena has been missing since Crown Jewel and has even teased retirement, but depending on how the MRI goes, we could be seeing him face Punk relatively soon. On the World's End media scrum, Tony Khan confirmed that Andrade El Idolo has left AEW, and it's believed he'll be returning to WWE soon enough. Now, more has come to light about Andrade's All Elite tenure, and the former NXT and US champion had a roller coaster time under contract. Fightful Select reports that Andrade's initial contract spanned 2 years, but it was extended due to injury time, keeping him signed to the end of 2023. AEW talent reportedly said that Andrade was transparent about his contract and for a long time expressed intentions to stick with AEW and consider another deal. Towards the end of his tenure, he informed fellow wrestlers that he was heading back to WWE. As the report states, Andrade has finished up with All Elite Wrestling and has an agreement with WWE. The path there was a roller coaster. We were told Andrade's original deal was only for 2 years, but there was injury time added that extended it that ended up with him being signed through the end of the year. AEW talent said that Andrade was often very open about his contract status and that his deal would be up in or at the end of 2023. Numerous talent also said that he'd mentioned he'd planned to stay with AEW and was considering another, but by the end of his run, had told wrestlers he was headed back to WWE. Several in AEW actually expected him to show up on WWE programming the week after he left AEW. Some within AEW anticipated Andrade El Idolo's appearance on WWE programming the week following his departure, but that didn't happen. A return to WWE would reunite Andrade with his wife Charlotte, who Fightful ads had pushed for Andrade to return to WWE, while Andrade pushed for Ric Flair to join AEW. With Charlotte injured, a WWE return will ironically keep Andrade and Flair apart at this time, and we'll have to see what's next for the ex-AEW star. Over the years, Keith Lee has seen multiple setbacks, including a life-threatening fight with COVID, and now the Limitless One is facing another obstacle. Lee revealed on a private account via House of Wrestling that he will be having 2 surgeries, with one being on his heart and the other in his throat. Lee didn't provide details as to the reasons why, but said after 19 years of these issues, it's time to get fixed, adding it's certainly one way to start 2024. Lee joined AEW in 2022, but many feel his run hasn't lived up to expectations, but for now, his focus is on his health, and we're wishing him the absolute best. AEW Dynamite now, as the main event was commercial-free thanks to a sponsorship from the new Suicide Squad game, in which Samoa Joe voices King Shark. It was therefore fitting that Joe headlined Dynamite in his first AEW World title defense, which saw him go one-on-one with Hook. The cold-hearted handsome devil went right at the AEW champion in an attempt to gain an early advantage, but the veteran Joe was able to fire back immediately. A massive back elbow from Joe stopped Hook in his tracks and changed the pace of this match, and for the next few minutes, Joe showed what being violent means. Joe worked in a manner fitting of an AEW World Champion, and while the differences are minor, we do prefer the new title design compared to the old. Hook flipped off Joe after being put through an announce table, so Joe powerbombed him onto the apron, though Hook was able to avoid being counted out. The way Joe slammed Hook onto the announce table was nasty. He took a victory lap around the ring while the ref checked on Hook. When Joe tried to finish him with a power slam, Hook kicked out, which he'd also do when Joe hit him with a muscle buster in a jaw-dropping move. To the surprise of Joe and the announcers who thought he was done, Hook mounted a comeback, but it was Joe's coquina clutch that had eventually put him away. The crowd was incredibly invested in this, and everyone was on their feet for the final minutes of the match in a sign of how well things went. After all, nobody should have expected Joe's title reign to end so soon, but the fact that the crowd got invested shows the wrestlers did their job to perfection. Joe may have won, but the champ looked shocked with how much it took to put his challenger away, and Hook still had some trash talk when he came to. That led to Joe hitting another muscle buster, but Hook still refused to stay down, and before more damage could be done, Hangman Page was on the scene. The show ended with Page and Swerve Strickland both watching Joe walk up the ramp, as both men are hungry for a shot at the AEW World title. Everything about how this was paced and laid out was designed for maximum entertainment, and it delivered in every way, ending the show on a definite high. Now this week marks the 1-year anniversary of the death of Jay Briscoe, whose life ended in a car accident that also saw his daughters seriously injured. During this week's Dynamite, AEW paid tribute to Jay, with Mark Briscoe speaking to the crowd about his brother and said his oldest niece was told she'd never walk again. Mark then brought his nieces out, who walked without assistance, and the Briscoes hugged in a heartwarming, albeit bittersweet, moment on TV. Jay Briscoe is gone but will never be forgotten, and AEW made it clear that his legacy lives on through his family on this week's Dynamite. This week's Dynamite saw plenty of the company's top names at the show, but one of the most interesting names in North Charleston remained backstage. Sean Ross Sapp noted behind Fightful's paywall that Camille, the former NWA Women's Champion, was at the show, despite reports that she could be WWE bound. It was reported in recent weeks that WWE was expected to make an offer for her to join the NXT brand, though sources told Fightful that she hasn't signed a deal. As for why she was at Dynamite, it was said that she was visiting friends at the show, and there's no word on whether she talked business with Tony Khan. Camille had been a pivotal figure in the NWA Women's Division for an extended period, boasting a historic reign, and we'll have to see where she'll call home next. For as long as wrestling has been a thing, wrestlers have been encouraged to protect the business from those who would mock or belittle the industry. While the majority of people know that wrestling isn't entirely legit, wrestlers aren't going to let that slip, which led to an interesting situation this week down under. On Australia's Sunrise morning talk show, Grayson Waller and L.A. Knight were being interviewed, and the host asked Knight if he'd use one of his moves on him. When Knight said no, the host, obviously thinking the moves wouldn't hurt, asked for Waller to use a move on a production manager, and the superstar fired back. "I don't think you understand, because if I go over there, we're gonna have the police here, because I'm not gonna give you some fake punch. I'm gonna punch you straight in the jaw. The disrespect that you give me when you act like this isn't real. Don't act tough. You guys disrespect us. Are you kidding me?" Waller was clearly frustrated and protected kayfabe like a champ, and the production member left the set and things would eventually settle down. Waller's response will likely earn him some points backstage, as he handled the situation well, and the host will think twice the next time he laughs off the real risks involved in wrestling. At WrestleMania, Randy Orton has faced some huge names such as The Rock, Mick Foley, The Undertaker, Bray Wyatt, Triple H, AJ Styles, and more. Thanks to his lengthy hiatus, Orton didn't compete at WrestleMania 39, but knows of one match he wants to have at the Showcase of the Immortals. Speaking on the bump, Orton said his dream match would be a singles match at Mania against John Cena, one that sees the two men fighting for a title. He said, "A dream match for me would be to somehow find myself in a situation where I'm fighting Cena at WrestleMania for the title. I don't know how you get there, I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but I've never wrestled John at a WrestleMania in a singles match, so that, and we had some wars back in the day, so being able to revisit that after all this time. I think it's not only something that I would want, it's something that fans would eat up too." While Orton and Cena have battled for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania, that match also featured Triple H, but now the Viper wants Cena one-on-one. In the interview, Orton also spoke about his return to WWE at Survivor Series and admitted that the reveal on the Go Home Raw wasn't what he wanted. He said, "Kinda let the wind out of my sails. After it was all said and done, I had a great reaction. No one stepped on anyone's toes, they got Randy Orton back. Two different reactions, two different people. On a personal level, I was happy to have CM Punk back." CM Punk is also on the list of names Orton has faced at WrestleMania, but would you like to see one last singles match with John Cena? Let us know in the comments. During Tony Khan's latest outburst on Twitter, Jinder Mahal would fire back at the AEW president asking who TF is Hook and encouraged fans to watch Raw. While Mahal would delete this tweet, it didn't go unnoticed by fans, and Hook himself would take notice of the comment. In a video promo shared before Dynamite, Hook spoke about his match with Samoa Joe and added the line, "Then again, who the f*** am I anyway?" This was obviously a nod to Mahal's previous comment, as there have been questions as to whether Hook is big enough to be considered a top name in AEW. Ultimately, what Hook's been doing has been working with fans, but it's clear that the FTW champion took note of what Jinder Mahal had to say last week. Back to Dynamite, which opened with a package hyping the main event between Samoa Joe and Hook before Justin Roberts announced Christian Cage. For his TNT title match with Dustin Rhodes, Cage had Nick Wayne in kill switch while Rhodes was on his own and at an obvious disadvantage. Cage was in control until the fight spilled out of the ring, where Rhodes slammed his head into the announce table and threw him into the steps. From there, things became more back and forth between the two veterans, and in a rare instance, Cage was the younger competitor in the match by several years. Once again, Cage's control of the crowd was second to none, as he can get heat whenever he wants, which hasn't always been the case. He's now found the best version of himself and was able to hit a spear and a kill switch on Rhodes, who was somehow able to kick out. A second kill switch finally put Rhodes away, with Cage retaining the TNT title in a highly entertaining opener. In tag team action, Orange Cassidy and Trent Beretta dispatched of Penta and Komander, but the victorious duo had little time to celebrate. Post-match, the Kingdom and Roderick Strong appeared, and Strong would issue a challenge for OC's AEW International Championship. AEW Dynamite saw the crowning of new ROH World Six-Man Tag Team Champions, as Bullet Club Gold were able to dethrone the Mogul Embassy. Not only did the trio of Jay White and the Guns win the titles, they had new entrance music before competing in a highly action-packed trios encounter. Prince Nana at ringside was, of course, an advantage for the Mogul Embassy, but it was AEW's Anthony Bowens who neutralized Nana with an attack in the closing moments. This gave Jay White the opening to connect a Blade Runner on Bishop Khan to get the win, the titles, and end the Mogul Embassy's 78-day reign. With new champions being crowned, it would be interesting to see the reign of Bullet Club Gold unfold, being the new holders of the six-man titles. But what did you think of this title change on AEW Dynamite? Sound off in the comments. Dynamite also saw a sit-down interview with the Young Bucks, who seemingly took a shot at CM Punk with what they had to say this week. The Bucks were asked to address all that had happened as of late and mentioned that they would do everything in their power to protect AEW. The Bucks then talked about how the company seemed to have lost its way and how certain superstars changed the culture and brought in toxicity, saying, "We did lose our way. It was like the culture shifted and toxicity creeped into the locker rooms, and the perception of the company, it was just different. I think I know why. We started to lean on yesterday's self-serving, superficial, cancerous superstars." Now, many fans took that to be a dig at Punk, especially given that the Chicago-made superstar was called a cancer following All Out 2022. The Bucks returned to AEW with a noticeable personality change, but according to them, they're exactly the same and keeping AEW safe. During their sit-down interview with the ever-present Renee Paquette, the Bucks told her not to refer to them by Matt and Nick Jackson, but to use their full names. Nick said, "Can you show a little more respect next time and call us by our God-given names of Nicholas and Matthew Jackson? You see, we're executive vice presidents around here, and it's time to take this job a little more seriously." The Bucks are expected to face Sting and Darby Allin in the Icons' final match. But what did you make of their promo this week? Let us know below. In another interview, Chris Jericho addressed his and Sammy Guevara's loss at Battle of the Belts, but during his promo, he was interrupted by Matt Sydal. The two exchanged words before agreeing to a match on this week's Rampage in what'll be a high-profile outing for Sydal against the inaugural AEW champion. In women's division action, Deonna Purrazzo took on Anna Jay, all while timeless Toni Storm watched on from commentary, flanked by Luther and Mariah May. Though she's AEW's newest acquisition, Purrazzo came into this match with more experience than Jay and was able to overpower her younger opponent. Purrazzo came across as the veteran trying to put a younger star in her place before getting the win and gave a post-match interview with Renee Paquette. The virtuosa addressed Storm directly and said this was not the same Toni she'd known for years, which only angered the AEW Women's World Champion. Storm got on top of Luther's shoulders and berated Purrazzo until being carried away in a highly entertaining conclusion to this segment. In a meeting of two of the best young teams AEW has, Private Party defeated Top Flight in a match that ended in some controversy. Mark Quinn grabbed the top rope during a pinning combination, and while Private Party celebrated their win, Top Flight and Action Andretti voiced their anger from the ring. After her WWE NXT career fizzled out, Deonna Purrazzo would make her name in Impact Wrestling, where she became one of the top knockouts of all time. Now though, Purrazzo is with AEW after having debuted earlier this month, and she's now revealed the reason for her exit from Impact. On Talk is Jericho, Purrazzo spoke about leaving Impact shortly before the relaunch as TNA Wrestling, as she said, "I was the champion for a very long time in Impact. I got to work with all of the women that were in our locker room, and it was just like, what other stories are there to tell? Everyone kind of put me over at that point. I've beaten everybody. They kind of figured maybe I was on my way out, so I got to do the favors and put everyone else over on my way out. I was like, what else is there to do? There's no one new coming in that I could work with. I don't know what else there is to tell here." While WWE had interest in her, Purrazzo signed with AEW instead, perhaps because her previous stint in WWE from 2018 to 2020 was marked by underutilization. Fans didn't get to see her realize her potential in WWE, and on the podcast, Purrazzo spoke about being vocal about addressing issues in NXT. Purrazzo was consistently seeking honest feedback, but frustrated by a lack of clarity on her TV readiness, she reached her breaking point and gave WWE an ultimatum. That ultimatum was for WWE to provide greater feedback for improvement or release her, and ultimately, Purrazzo would leave WWE behind 4 weeks later. The virtuoso believed that a breakdown in mutual respect had happened, and believed her outspokenness led to a negative reputation, making it challenging to undo. A lot has changed since then for Purrazzo, and perhaps had WWE treated her better in the past, she wouldn't have debuted for AEW earlier this month. Last year, the NBA's Joel Embiid was fined for using a DX-themed celebration, complete with crotch chop, which caught the attention of WWE. After being fined $35,000, Embiid was invited to WrestleMania 40 by Triple H, but now the 76er is making headlines again with his celebration. With a standout 41-point performance in a recent game, Embiid once again used a DX crotch chop during a decisive moment, and fans are now anticipating another NBA fine. It was just over 3 years ago that the wrestling world lost Brodie Lee, and since then, Amanda Huber has done her best to raise their children and keep his legacy alive. Unfortunately, Amanda often faces hate from trolls online, and this week, she fought back against one awful name that has a history of bad takes. In a tweet, Amanda spoke about the hate Deonna Purrazzo recently received from fat-shaming people, which led to a response from Kevin Scampoli. Scampoli attacked Huber as a bad mother, making reference to the death of Brodie Lee, and claimed that Amanda took her kids away from Brodie in his final hours. Of course, Scampoli has no proof of this, and Huber fought back, saying there's not a day that some incel doesn't try to paint her as a bad mom. If Scampoli's name rings a bell, it's because he was the one laughing it up with Sammy Guevara as the pair discussed wanting to sexually assault Sasha Banks a few years back. While Guevara would apologize and has tried to be a better person since then, Scampoli clearly hasn't grown in the years since, as seen with his disgusting comments this week.